Well, we are so happy to have you here today to join us for a conversation with Mark McNulty, an amazing action coach who has a lot of wisdom and expertise in working with nonprofits. So we're happy that you could be here today. Grab a cup of coffee for our 15-minute coffee break. And Mark, if you could introduce yourself and when you started with Action Coach, where you're coaching from, and then we're going to get into some conversation.
Okay, great, thanks. It's great to be here, Lisa. So yeah, my name's Mark McNulty. I joined Action Coach. I came out of July 2004 training. Yes, that's 2004. So coming up on my 18-year anniversary. And I'm a master coach, global trainer, and I've been coaching nonprofits. I first one was a chamber director back in 2006, 2007. So I've been doing it on and off for quite a few years, and I find it very enjoyable, and it's just a great way to give back to the community, which is part of obviously Action Coach's vision and mission, but also my personal for my firm. So I've got a firm based out of Louisville, Kentucky, and I've also got a franchise in Indiana. So we kind of straddle the Ohio River and cover both sides with two franchises here, and building a firm team in Louisville, and just a practice over in Southern Indiana to support the Louisville market with the Indiana businesses.
Wow, excellent. Okay, I learn something new every single time I talk to you, so it's great to hear about your background and experience with Action Coach. So regarding nonprofits and what I like to refer to as for impact, the for impact sector, what approaches have been successful to you in coaching nonprofits?
So I usually start with two things. It's one is financials, right? So financial mastery, doesn't matter what kind of business you are, for-profit, nonprofit. I like using for impact. That's great. And I've taught my last two coaching for a cause clients that, and they were like, oh my gosh, it never occurred to us. And it just gives a completely different mindset. So I love that, because they're really, they don't call it profit, but they do have to be profitable in the business sense. If they're not bringing in more money than they're spending, there's a problem, just like in a for-profit business. So getting their financials in order, their KPIs around their numbers, and really just getting budgets and really thinking through that, and teaching them the same budgeting concepts, break even, profit break even, or growth break even is what we often call it. What I call it with the four impacts, rainy day fund break even, whatever you want to call it. So it's there. And then the other one is when I'm working with, it's typically the smaller ones, it's an executive director. With the bigger ones, it's often like a CEO, but it's board relationships and board engagement. Nothing worse than a disconnected board who comes in, once a quarter, disrupts everything, and then goes away for another quarter and doesn't participate. And so one of the things I focus on a lot with the CEOs, presidents, executive directors, whatever their role is, board engagement. How do you get your board more engaged? And there's lots of different ways to do that. And it's figuring out each board member, every board's got a little different makeup. Some of the people are there because they truly want to volunteer for the organization. Some of them are there to pad their resume. Some of them are there because they are a key benefactor in the community. And so you have to understand each person's, what they're getting out of being on the board, so you can tap into giving them the right things to do to support you and your organization.
Yeah, Mark, I really love your answers there, and I totally agree. So, first you're prioritizing financials. I'd love to dig a little bit deeper with that. When you're focusing on the financials, when you're first coaching a nonprofit, do you work with the finance committee? Do you work with staff, like if there's a CFO or if there's a director of finance? What has been your experience?
I usually start out with whoever is in that ownership role, whether it's a CFO, director of finance, and make sure that he or she and I are on the same page about what their financials say.
Okay.
It's because otherwise you're fighting that person all the time.
Mm-hmm.
With any conversation you have with anybody else, you're fighting that person. So you got to see eye to eye, or if you can't see eye to eye, you need to know that, and that needs to be elevated to the appropriate, whether it's the board or the CEO or, but I always work to get agreement at that level. And then it's okay, how do we get the rest of the organization engaged with budgeting, with understanding their budgets, their expectations around that. But I always try to get some level of agreement and see eye to eye with that person who owns finances for the organization.
Yes. And, I want to go back to what you said with the mindset with For Impact. I think that's why it's really important for us to focus on what the organization does, not what it doesn't do, which is nonprofit and defining it. My experience working with nonprofits in the past has been, it's a weak point. It's their weakest point is their financial literacy, their financial management, is they've had a very stagnant budget, as opposed to looking at this from a dynamic point of view of what you can do to leverage and maximize your budget and your projections. And they kind of rule that out because by definition, they think, well, we're a nonprofit. Right. So it gives them kind of permission to think, well, we don't pay attention to that stuff. We pay attention to our impact and our social services and what we do. But my experience is it's important from a coaching perspective going into it to say, if you're willing to look at your nonprofit For Impact from the point of view of best business practices, then we want to and we can help you. And it's having them accept that so that they have an expectation that part of best business practices, the first priority is to look at finances. I'd love to dig deeper too about what you said with board engagement. So you talked about the need for everybody being on the same page and consensus, congruency. What are a few things that you've seen that have worked well in getting the board more engaged or bringing them together more? Is there one or two examples you could share?
So I worked with a small chamber. Probably the best example, I've worked with some chambers, executive directors of chambers, where they typically have, those boards are great at giving the executive director a pile of 20 events to go conduct, and then thrusting their hands and walking away. And so I teach my executive directors on the chambers to go back to their boards and say, great, I'd love to do this, but first I need your help. Right. And so, I can't do this alone. So I need volunteers to help me put together the volunteer teams. So I don't even ask them to specifically volunteer to support the event. We get to that eventually, but it's getting them engaged. So help me. So who on your team at your business or in your sphere of influence can you go get for me to head up this committee? Right? I love your idea. Help me put the committee together. I've talked to boards. I just did a strategic planning session with the board in February, and I had the board on the table, and I said, all right, so who here is willing to commit more of their time this year to supporting the organization? Because we've got a plan for the money, but there's a lot of work to do. So, then I said, so in your bylaws, in your, what are the expectations of board members? And they all looked around at each other and said, no idea. I said, do we at least have a number of meetings you're supposed to come to? And they asked, oh yeah. Oh, what's that number? I don't know. The executive director pulled out the 3-ring binder that looked like it hadn't been opened in 10 years and found it, and everybody was shocked by the number. Everybody was so, it's good board practices define board roles. And so it's just pushing, but it's getting the board to understand their responsibility.
Yeah.
You get people like the mayor is automatically on the board. So no one's going to ask the mayor to, man the booth, right? But I would, but most people wouldn't. That's just me. But I can ask the mayor to, hey, who on your staff can we work with to coordinate this? Or who on the city council should we go talk to? Could you tell them we're coming and what we need? And so it's figuring out what each board member can do, because there's a reason they're on the board. Tap into it, either their time, their money, hopefully both, but also their influence.
Mm-hmm.
So even the ones that aren't there to show up at events, that they're there because it's their company gets an automatic seat because they bought it, and that's fine. But give them a job of helping you set up a committee so that they have something to do. But it's and I always have them phrase, I need your help, because that lowers the defenses. Instead of saying, hey, I need you to do something for me, that the barriers go up, the walls go up. It's, I need your help with something.
Yeah.
And by the way, that works with for-profits too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you are spot on as far as my experience as well. That you're talking about that 3-ring binder that's been on the shelf, and the value that an action coach can bring to an executive director. Having served as an executive director, I can tell you, as many CEOs, it can be a lonely place. And when you're working for a board, and that's who you report to, and I've said you work for either the pleasure or the mercy of the board. And you're that in the middle between operations and staff and executing what you need to do, and us being a support system for the executive director and helping to guide them for what we know as best business practices. A lot of times if there hasn't been a statement of commitment that's been executed by the board of directors, that's a really good place to start, because, for them to go back and read through the bylaws is one thing. It's probably unrealistic, but if you have a 1-page statement of commitment of what the expectations are for the board when it comes to meetings, when it comes to dues, when it comes to what they're going to do for connecting you to how many people, and what that's going to yield, that's something that they can sink their teeth into. Mark, I want to bring up one more thing and then ask you another question, because you've got some really good insight. When you were talking, my experience is when you're saying, and you always say, I need your help. What's really helped me in nonprofits is to really clarify the vision and the mission of the organization. And it may mean refreshing the mission coming in, because a lot of times that mission was, nobody can recollect what it is. It's in the book on the shelf. It hasn't really been talked about for 10 years. Or we haven't had a conversation about, are you truly guided by the vision and the mission? And my experience with nonprofits is they've been very mission-centric on how and what they do in their services, but they haven't developed any kind of plan for where the organization is headed, which really ties into the budget and the finance. And so what I think is really helpful is to clarify those things first in that mastery level, like action coach, and say, okay, now that we're clear on this, in order to achieve these things, here's how you can help, right? And here's where we need you. And it gives them something to anchor, because a lot of nonprofits become, as you said, event-driven and goal-driven, just about getting the goal and the fundraising for that particular event, but they're not tying it to the 5-year where we're headed plan.
Right.
So before we end, I know we have a few minutes, but I wanted to ask you a couple more questions. One is, what tools do you use in the Action Coach system that help you the most in coaching nonprofits?
The 5 ways is a big one. Because it's, and we in the nonprofit world, we call things a little differently, but it's the 5 ways, and then 90-day plans, they're great. You know, they all do annual plans. They all love their weekend retreat, strategic planning weekend, right? They all love that, but then they don't come back and do anything with it. So getting them to actually put action plans in place instead of strategic plans, or not instead of, in addition to, you need both. But that's been a great one. And then, you know, just teaching them lead generation. Outside, again, outside of events, right? So they all have their big event fundraiser, but it's, you know, what else are you doing between events? Because, you know, like example, you know, the one I'm working with, you know, they haven't been able to have their big event in 2 years.
Yeah.
Right. So they've just been languishing.
Yeah.
And they got lucky, and a big benefactor stepped in and just covered their bills, but they didn't have any other marketing. Their website, social, you know, so they don't tell their story well.
Yeah.
So they've got a lot of clarity. So it goes back to storytelling, which helps with quality lead generation. I like, with lead generation, I like to focus more on quality than quantity, because quantity just costs money and creates a lot of work. I work on quality, and that takes message and story. And then, you know, website, social media. So many of them are terrible at getting their message. They've got a great message, but they're horrible about getting it out. And when you've got a great message, that gives you quality leads, which raises your conversion rate, so that your number of donors goes up. And so, and then I work on repeat business, right? Number of transactions. So how many of your donors are one and done? Do you have a donor database?
Mm-hmm.
You know, are you keeping in contact with them? When was the last time they heard from you? You know, so it's really treating their donors like customers. And that's a big mind shift for them. They really struggle with that. And it's helping them understand that, no, we're not trying to, you know, we are trying to sell them something. It's an idea. It's a belief system. It's a value. And what we're selling is that this cause that you've shown with your money before you care about, we're trying to take care of it for you. Yeah. And we need your help. You know, we are your lever to support this cause. And just, you know, helping them have the impact they want in their areas, and just changing their mindset of, well, we don't want to bother. So many times we don't want to bother our donors, right? Just like for-profits, we don't want to bother our customers. Well, yeah, you're right. We don't want to bother them, but that doesn't mean we don't contact them, that we don't keep in touch with them. So 5 ways is a big one. And just working through those, you can easily get huge increases in donations and contributions, because you've got a more well-rounded and it's just delivering your message. And then, like I said, the budgeting tools. I teach executive directors time management. They're just like every business owner, they're terrible time managers. So, you know, help them, you know, it's all about, you know, prioritizing the right things. And then delegation to staff, delegation to the board. And then all of the mindset slides, you know, just like with every client, every other client, you know, teaching them above and below the point. Mm-hmm. You know, formula for change. Boy, that's a great way to get donations up. And just, you know, those are some of my favorites. And then, you know, and with the bigger ones, it's teaching them how to systemize. Mm-hmm. Oh boy. And then, you know, hiring, you know, I've used the 4-hour hiring format with some.
That's excellent. Lots of good resources. And I want to encourage listeners and viewers to look into the Coaching for a Cause resource library, because you'll find the 5 ways there. You'll find the 90-day or quarterly growth club planning just for nonprofits. KPIs are listed in there. And you referenced also above the point, formula for change, the 4-hour hire, And, you know, the other things that you talk about just in general that we do for profit, there's no reason why we shouldn't be, you know, 80% of those businesses are the same.
Mm-hmm.
In general. Yep. I mean, Pareto's law comes back to, when it comes to 80-20, it's the same. So it's right. Us getting comfortable with feeling we can add value for coaching the nonprofits, which brings me to my final question. For action coaches who haven't coached a nonprofit before, what 3 steps would you share to say, okay, here's what you can take action on right now. They're going to help you to engage with nonprofits.
So the first one, so the 2 things we did this latest round, they got us a bunch of, you know, first of all, in our networking, you know, for a month in all of our BNI's networking, our ask was, you know, we'd like to be introduced to your favorite nonprofit. Mm. You know, we're looking for, you know, there's 3 of us, so we're looking for 3 nonprofits that, you know, that want to improve their operations and improve their ability to deliver value to their cause. And you know, so that was our ask in our networking.
Excellent.
And then I just followed the regular process. Trying to remember who it was that did an awesome Facebook post, but use social media.
Hala.
Yes, Hala did. That was a fabulous. We copied that. We did the same thing. That was a fabulous post she did. Utilize social media to let people know. And then the other one was just, so, you know, I'd been doing it but for Sandy and Kylie, it was go into the dashboard, look at the tools, get comfortable with them so that you have confidence that you can apply this, you know, just these same tools to nonprofits that you can apply to for-profits. It's no different.
That's excellent, Mark.
And if I was going to throw a last tip, if you're not sure where, you know, what's a cause you care about? You know, what are the nonprofits in that space? Go call them and say, hey, I'd love to chat with you about how we might be able to work together to help your organization.
Excellent. Those are great tips. Network. So add that to your conversations and saying, who is your favorite nonprofit? What top 3 nonprofits could we improve operations and add value to? Look at what you can do on social media. You can go to Hala Debussey's feed and you can see what it is that she did to engage nonprofits. She had like an application basically for coaching for a cause.
That was awesome. It was awesome.
Yeah. And then you're right, get comfortable with the tools. Karen has done such a good job of organizing the tools and resources that Coaching for a Cause coaches have access to. We encourage you to look at that. And then last but not least, you know, start to think about what cause speaks to you and connect with those 4 impact organizations that are making a difference that you can have a conversation with about how you could help them. So great tips. Well, Mark, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. I know everyone who listens to it will benefit from it and pick up something new. And we encourage you to continue to watch our Coaching for a Cause coffee conversations and start today if you haven't already. And if you have, make sure that you're going on to the Coaching for a Cause page that we have to sign up for your commitment list that you can add to it, because we really want your data on who you're coaching. All right. Thank you so much. Until next time. Bye-bye.
Bye, Lisa. Bye, everybody.